Margaret had spent her entire life sacrificing for her daughter, Emily. From the moment her husband, Robert, walked out on them for another woman, leaving her with nothing but a pile of unpaid bills and a 6-month-old baby, she vowed to give Emily the best life she could. "I'll take care of you, sweetheart," Margaret whispered to baby Emily as she rocked her to sleep, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You'll never feel alone. I promise." She worked multiple jobs, cleaning houses in the morning, waitressing in the afternoons, and sewing at night, just to ensure Emily never felt the sting of hunger or the shame of secondhand clothes. "Mom, why don't I have new shoes like the other kids?" Emily asked one day, her small fingers tracing the worn edges of her sneakers. Margaret knelt down, cupping Emily's face. "Because I'm saving for something even better, sweetheart. A future where you can have everything you deserve." Years of hardship, sleepless nights, and skipped meals followed, but Margaret had no regrets. Every sacrifice was worth it. And when Emily graduated from college, donned her cap and gown, and ran into her arms, Margaret felt her heart swell with pride. "We did it, Mom." Emily beamed, clutching her diploma. "All your hard work, none of it was wasted." Margaret hugged her tightly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "No, sweetheart. It was never work, it was love." When Emily married a kind man named Jason and had a daughter of her own, Margaret believed all her sacrifices had finally been justified. She had done what she set out to do, given Emily a good life. Or so she thought. So, when Emily asked her to move in and help with little Sophie so she and Jason could focus on their careers, Margaret agreed without hesitation. She had retired from work by then, and there was nothing she loved more than spending time with her granddaughter. But as the months passed, she began to see things she hadn't expected. At first, Margaret dismissed the small things, the way Emily would barely say good morning or how she only spoke to her when she needed something. But soon, it became clear that she was not a welcome member of the family, she was the help. "Mom, can you do the laundry today?" Emily asked while sipping her coffee, already dressed in her corporate attire. "Of course, dear. And I'll make Sophie's lunch too," Margaret replied, forcing a smile. "Oh, and Jason needs his suits ironed," Emily added as she grabbed her purse. Margaret nodded, but her heart ached. The requests turned into demands, and soon, she was responsible for all the cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, and, of course, looking after Sophie from morning till night. There were no words of gratitude, no gestures of love. She was a maid, not a mother. Her days became an endless cycle of chores. Mornings started with preparing breakfast, dressing Sophie, and packing lunches. Afternoons were spent cleaning the house, doing laundry, and running errands. Evenings revolved around cooking dinner and tidying up. Emily and Jason barely acknowledged her presence, except to issue more tasks. Margaret tried to tell herself that this was her role now, that she was helping her daughter. But deep down, loneliness gnawed at her heart. One evening, as Margaret finished folding laundry, she overheard a hushed conversation between Emily and Jason. "Your mom is here to help, Em. We'd be drowning without her." "We can't afford daycare," Jason said. "I know, but she's always around. It's like she's living here for free, and we have to cater to her too," Emily replied, her voice irritated. Margaret's hands trembled as she clutched the laundry basket. Living here for free? Had Emily forgotten the years Margaret spent suffering just to give her a good life? Tears pricked her eyes, but she swallowed them down. One evening, as Margaret set the dinner table, she accidentally dropped a glass. It shattered across the floor, the noise echoing through the house. Emily stormed into the kitchen. "Mom! Can you be more careful? This isn't your house, and I don't have money to keep replacing things you break." Margaret's breath caught. The words stung, each syllable like a knife. "This isn't your house." She met Emily's cold stare and whispered, "I raised you in a home where you never felt like a burden." "I wish I could say the same now." Emily rolled her eyes, unmoved. "I didn't ask you to give up everything for me. That was your choice." Margaret's chest tightened, tears threatening to spill. Emily turned and walked away, not offering a single word of apology. As weeks passed, Margaret became more withdrawn. She did her chores without complaint, but something inside her had begun to harden. She started noticing Jason's absences, the way Emily stayed up late on her phone, smiling at messages Margaret was never meant to see. One afternoon, as she was tidying up Emily's room, she noticed her daughter's phone buzzing incessantly. It had fallen under the bed, and Margaret, without thinking, picked it up. A message flashed across the screen. "I miss you. When can we be together again?" Margaret's breath caught in her throat. She hesitated but scrolled up, reading enough to confirm her worst fears. Emily was having an affair. Her daughter, for whom she had sacrificed everything, was betraying the family she had built. And Jason, oblivious, hardworking Jason, had no idea. Margaret sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. Should she tell Jason? Should she confront Emily? Would she even care? Her mind raced with memories of Robert, the husband who had abandoned her, the man who had betrayed their family for selfish desires. And now, her own daughter was following in his footsteps. Margaret felt sick. That evening, Margaret waited until Sophie was asleep before approaching Emily in the kitchen. "We need to talk," Margaret said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Emily barely looked up from her phone. "Can't it wait, Mom? I'm tired." "No. I know about the affair." The color drained from Emily's face. What are you talking about?" Margaret placed the phone on the counter. "I saw the messages, Emily." "I know." Emily's eyes flashed with anger. "How dare you go through my phone? That's none of your business." "None of my business?" Margaret's voice cracked. "You made it my business when you brought me into your home, treated me like a servant, and betrayed the very foundation of the family I gave up everything to protect. Does Jason know? Does Sophie deserve this?" Emily crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "You don't understand. Jason and we've been struggling. I needed something for myself." Margaret shook her head in disbelief. "I struggled, Emily. Alone. Without a husband, without help. And I never once betrayed you. It's different." Emily snapped. "You don't know what it's like." "No, Emily. You don't know what it's like to give your life for someone, only to realize they never really cared for you in the first place." Margaret took a deep breath. "I'm leaving." Emily's eyes widened. "You can't just leave. What about Sophie? What about helping us?" Margaret's lips trembled, but she stood firm. "Find a daycare. Find a babysitter. Find someone else to clean up your messes. I deserve better." That night, Margaret packed her things. She kissed Sophie goodbye, whispering, "I love you, sweetheart." Jason found her at the door. "Margaret, where are you going?" She hesitated before answering. "I think it's time I started living for myself, Jason." He looked confused but nodded, sensing something deeper at play. "We'll miss you." Margaret smiled sadly. "Take care of Sophie. And be careful with your heart." As she walked out, the night air felt different, cooler, freer. For the first time in decades, she was no longer carrying someone else's burden. She had been a mother, a caregiver, a protector. But now, she was finally going to be something she had forgotten how to be, herself. She walked away without looking back, her heart heavy but her spirit light. For the first time in a long while, she was stepping toward a future that belonged solely to her. Margaret, having saved a small amount of money over the years, found a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. She took up a part-time job at a local library, something she enjoyed and that allowed her to maintain her independence. It wasn't a life of luxury, but it was hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Meanwhile, Emily's world quickly unraveled. Jason discovered the affair when he confronted her one evening. "Who is he, Emily?" Jason's voice was cold as he held up her phone, open to the damning messages. Emily stammered. "Jason, I can explain." "Don't," he cut her off. "I trusted you. I built a life with you. And this is how you repay me?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I was lost." Jason shook his head. "You weren't lost, Emily. You were selfish. And now, I want a divorce." Things only got worse. Emily's boss's wife, the true owner of the company, found out about the affair. She called Emily into her office the next day. "You have some nerve," the woman sneered. "Sleeping with my husband while working under my roof. You're fired, effective immediately. And trust me, I'll make sure no respectable company hires you again." With her reputation ruined, Emily struggled to find another job. No firm wanted to be associated with her scandal. She was forced to take a menial job as a waitress at a local diner, barely making enough to pay rent. Worse yet, Jason fought for full custody of Sophie, and won. In court, his lawyer painted Emily as unstable, reckless, and unfit to be a primary parent. The judge agreed. Emily was granted only weekend visitation. Desperate, she reached out to Margaret. "Mom, please. I have nothing left. I need you." Margaret read the message but did not reply immediately. She let the silence stretch, allowing Emily to feel the weight of her choices. One night, Emily stood outside Margaret's door, hesitating. Her fingers hovered over the doorbell before she finally pressed it. When Margaret opened the door, her expression remained unreadable, no shock, no anger, just quiet resolve. Emily stood there, her lips parted, but no words came out. Her throat felt tight, and before she could stop them, tears slipped down her cheeks. "Mom. I was wrong." Silence stretched between them before Margaret finally spoke. "Wrong about what?" Emily inhaled sharply, struggling to steady her voice. "About everything. I hurt you. I took you for granted. I assumed you'd always forgive me, no matter what. I never truly saw everything you did for me, until now." Her words tumbled out in a rush, heavy with remorse. Margaret listened, letting her speak, offering no reassurances. When Emily fell silent, Margaret didn't reach for her. She didn't tell her it was okay. Instead, Margaret stepped aside, leaving the door open. Then she said, "Come in." From that night on, Emily never once asked for her mother's forgiveness. She knew it wasn't something she could demand. Instead, she showed her. She moved in without complaint, asked for nothing, and gave without expectation. She learned how to cook, how to clean, how to listen, how to care for her mother, just as she had once cared for her. At first, Margaret remained distant, guarded. But as the days passed, the bitterness that had settled deep within her began to lose its hold. One morning, after returning from her morning walk, Margaret passed by a bakery. On impulse, she bought a box of Emily's favorite pastries and placed them on the kitchen table without a word. When Emily saw them, her hands trembled, and her eyes shone with silent gratitude. Years later, Emily had rebuilt her life. She found stability in her career, regained her independence, and eventually moved into a small apartment not far away. But she still visited often, always bringing Margaret's favorite flowers and joining her for evening walks. One afternoon, Emily arrived with a tray of homemade cookies. As she set them down on the kitchen table, Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You made these?" she asked, picking one up. Emily chuckled. "I know, shocking, right? Try one before you judge too hard." Margaret took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. After a moment, she gave a small nod. "Not bad." "Not bad?" Emily feigned offense. "That's high praise coming from you." Margaret sighed, setting the cookie down. "You always did have a way of surprising me." Emily hesitated, then softly said, "I know things can't be like they were. But I don't want to lose what we still have." Margaret studied her daughter for a long moment before reaching across the table and giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "Neither do I," she admitted. "We'll take it one step at a time." Emily's lips curled into a small, genuine smile. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And it was enough. One evening, after much hesitation, Emily found herself standing outside Jason and Sophie's home. The porch light cast a warm glow, making the house look inviting, like the life she had once dreamed of reclaiming. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the door, her breath shallow as she braced herself for what was to come. Jason opened the door, surprise flickering across his face before his expression hardened. "Emily," he said, his voice calm but distant. "Hi, Jason," she murmured, forcing a smile that faltered. "Can we talk?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Sophie's inside. Come in." Emily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the cozy living room. The scent of home-cooked food lingered in the air, and in the corner, a few toys were scattered near the couch. A painful ache settled in her chest. This was the home she had ruined. Before she could speak, a soft, unfamiliar voice broke the silence. "Jason? Who's at the door?" Emily turned just as a woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was beautiful, elegant but effortless, with kind eyes that immediately took Emily aback. The woman stopped in her tracks when she saw Emily, her expression shifting to cautious understanding. "Emily," Jason said, his tone careful. "This is Claire. My wife." Emily's breath caught, but she forced herself to smile. "Hi, Claire," she said, extending her hand. Claire accepted it with a polite but reserved nod. "It's nice to finally meet you. Jason has told me a lot about you." Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. "I bet he has." "I appreciate you meeting me," she said instead, forcing the words out. Jason cleared his throat. "I just thought it was important. For Sophie's sake. Claire's been in her life for a while now, and I wanted to be upfront with you." Emily nodded, though the pain in her chest was unbearable. "This should have been me. This was supposed to be my life." But she had ruined it, and now she had to face the reality she had created. Claire's voice was gentle. "Sophie loves you, Emily. And I would never try to replace you. But I hope we can all find a way to make things work, for her." Emily blinked rapidly, willing herself not to break down. "I just want what's best for her," she whispered. Jason exhaled, seeming relieved. "Then we're on the same page." Just then, small footsteps patted against the floor, and Sophie appeared in the hallway, rubbing her tired eyes. "Mommy?" Emily's heart clenched. She crouched down, opening her arms. "Hi, baby." Sophie hesitated, looking at her father first. Jason gave her a small nod, and she took a cautious step forward. Emily's voice trembled. "I love you so much, sweetheart." Sophie stared at her for a long moment before taking another step, then another, until she was close enough for Emily to pull her into a tight embrace. Claire watched silently, then turned to Jason, squeezing his hand in quiet support. Emily finally looked up, her eyes glistening. She met Claire's gaze and, for the first time, truly saw her, not as a rival, but as someone who loved Sophie too. "I just want what's best for her," Emily whispered. Claire nodded. "So do we." Emily exhaled shakily. It wasn't the life she had once dreamed of, but maybe, just maybe, there was still a place for her in it. Emily lingered for a moment, memorizing the warmth of Sophie's embrace, the scent of her hair, the way her tiny arms wrapped around her so trustingly. But reality settled in like a heavy weight on her chest. This wasn't her home anymore. This wasn't her family, not the way it used to be. Slowly, she released Sophie and forced a smile. "I'll see you soon, okay?" Sophie nodded sleepily, rubbing her eyes. "Okay, Mommy." Emily glanced at Jason and Claire. Jason's expression was unreadable, while Claire simply offered a small, understanding nod. Taking a deep breath, Emily turned toward the door. With every step, the weight of her choices pressed harder on her shoulders. As she stepped outside, the cool night air stung her cheeks. She hesitated on the porch, gripping the railing, willing herself to breathe. Then, as if drawn by instinct, she turned back. Through the window, she saw Jason kneeling beside Sophie, helping her with her slippers. Claire stood nearby, smiling softly as she reached out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind Sophie's ear. They looked whole. Happy. A picture of the life Emily had shattered and could never fully reclaim. Her throat tightened as she lowered her head, blinking back tears. She had done this. And no matter how much she wished she could turn back time, some wounds left scars too deep to erase. With a final, quiet sigh, Emily stepped off the porch and into the night, her heart heavy with regret. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Comment below, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe. Your support means the world.